Hello, if you want to watch exclusive lemon content on What If Naruto, then go to my Boosty. The first link in the description here contains such hot stories for adults, such as What If Naruto was a daddy for Sarada, or Kushina and Mikoto vulgar Naruto mommies. Follow the link and enjoy. I'm waiting for you.
Formed by the love he felt for his wife Kushina, cherished and kept secret from the world, and now forced to carry a heavy burden. Looking at her, he said softly, "I'm sorry, but we both know that this is the only way for both of us to protect our village. And we make sure that we can transmit what is necessary to Naruto." What was supposed to be the happiest moment of his life, the birth of his baby, had turned into disaster. When the masked man attacked him at Iakusina, freeing the nine-tailed fox. The demon's rampage had already killed countless villagers, and deep in his soul, Minato knew that the mastermind behind this would not be satisfied with that. His beloved wife had the beast, barely restrained, and Minato knew with a heavy heart that a new Hinshiriki was needed for the fox. And Minato could not ask any other parent to put such a burden on his son, leaving only his own son, Naruto. Despite this, I feel sad. However, we still have time to make some final preparations. To give our son a fighting chance, the tired eyes of Kushina Namikaze in Uzumaki looked with confusion. While Minato visibly gathered what was left of his chakra, he created a shadow clone that disappeared with the flying thunder god. And then bit his thumb and knitted the hand signals for the summoning technique. Gamatora, a small but mature-looking toad, looked at Minato. What's the matter, Minato? Nine Tails is out, and your wife has chained him up, and that's a baby. It's your baby, I'm sorry, Gamatora, Minato replied, quickly pronouncing his words. I have one last favor to ask of you and the toads. They attacked us, and we have to turn Naruto into a new Hinshiriki. But the main problem now is this. Minato paused as his clone returned and dissipated, leaving behind a scroll, which the fourth Hokage quickly recognized and handed to Gamatora. When my son is ready, please hand him over. Gamatora carefully picked up the scroll and looked at the complex seals that closed it. What is it? Kushina's, wool and mine. Some messages, but also our big secrets, including the god of flying thunder. All for Naruto, smiling even though he was dying, Kushina ascended. A precaution to leave him everything he needs to start forging his own path in life, so that he can surpass us in every way. Gamatora gasped at the sight of the scroll in his hands, knowing that whoever possessed it would have the potential to rise to be a giant. In the shinobi world, undoubtedly, someone like Minato had started such a project not only long before he married Kushina, but even before he became a jonin. The man would have been acutely aware of all the enemies, both domestic and international, that he and Kushina had earned, as they ascended the ninja ranks over piles of corpses. Shocked by the trust his old friend had placed in him, Gamatora approached and swore to them both with the strongest oaths of the Topes, that he would prove himself worthy of their trust. Then, in a puff of smoke, he returned to Mount Myoboku with his precious treasure. We've done everything we could, Minato whispered as he began to seal the devouring seal of the dead demon. Between his will, the chakra sealed in him, and the power of the nine-tailed fox, Naruto would possess tools and weapons far beyond those that any ordinary ninja could possess. The die was cast, and now all he could do was believe in Naruto like a father should, because he knew that Naruto, Jiraiya's destined son, would lead the way through the coming disaster and change this world. Hidden Whirlpool. 16 years later, Akuyuki, the Jonin captain of the reborn village hidden in the eddies, walked towards the figure sitting on the edge of the cliff. Naruto Uzumaki, who was once his involuntary teacher, then his student, his friend, and finally his brother by choice. He had become a man who had achieved miracles. Then they will come. Naruto nodded his head slowly and sadly. When she ran away from home years ago, deep down she knew it could come to this. One of the many painful conclusions of that time. After all, the nine tails sealed inside was too valuable for the hidden blade. And Naruto had created something that dared to challenge the power and authority of the great nations. Yes, the 16-year-old boy knew that conflict with his former home was inevitable, even when he was trying to avoid it. He had only hoped to prevent it from becoming an open war. Even now, his various shadow clones throughout his spy network, and those receiving reports from Hidden Whirlpool's intelligence department kept sending him updates about the coming storm. I tried to avoid it, to present myself as a valuable ally. He hoped they would stay true to their peace philosophies, that my friends who still lived there could help me enough. But it seems that everything was in vain. As bitter as some of the memories she had of her old home were, there were still some good, warm ones, and, on the whole, life had been good. He had even improved significantly towards the end, as he had made new friends inside the Hidden Blade. Any further thoughts of Naruto were interrupted when someone else joined the two young men and descended from the sky. Fu, the seven-tailed Hinchiriki, approached Naruto naturally and sat down next to him, resting her head on his shoulder. Naruto, you've done everything you could. Your job now is to protect our village and those who live in it. To all the people who believe in you. When his only response was a vague growl, she sighed before trying again. You don't have to kill them, not at first, and not if they get the message. Just don't forget who we are really fighting against. Danzo, it was only years of mastering his temper that made it possible for Naruto to calm his rage. Yes, this conflict has been inevitable, obsessed. With Pax Konoha, Danzo would have been an enemy of Naruto, regardless of the decisions he would have made in his life. Even if he could have kept the Hidden Blade, their philosophies were too different. The fact that Naruto suspected that Danzo was deliberately working to leave Naruto emotionally vulnerable didn't help matters at all. And of all Naruto's personal enemies, Danzo was the only man he didn't respect at all. And given the degree of monsters found within Akatsuki's ranks, that was saying something. For Danzo, the Hidden Whirlpool was a threat to the Hidden Leaf's status as a great nation, and his last chance to demonstrate. To show the validity of his future vision for the village as the sixth cage. He would send everything he had to destroy Naruto, including his human puppets. Born from a Faustian pact with the captured Katsuki, Sasori of the Red Sand, Danzo was creating immortal, emotionless soldiers. Who possessed a lot. Far fewer weaknesses than normal humans. Ruth's madness had to be stopped, discredited, and, above all, as soon as possible. While the armies of the rest of the continents were still in crisis over the loss of most of the tailed beasts, as well as their other problems. Talking about that, Naruto pondered, and then spoke out loud to Aku and Fu. Make the scouts ready, and gather their special squads. The Akatsuki will be ready to make their move. They will want to attack when we and Konoha are at our most vulnerable by fighting each other. Aku sighed. Are you sure this is what we should do? He asked. It wasn't hesitation that made him question his orders, but the knowledge that what happened next would irrevocably change the world. As ruthless as he could be at times, Aku still wished for an alternative for the child world. It will not collapse into another cycle of seemingly endless violence. I know it's not the best option. Naruto snarled. What we are doing is almost crazy. Except, given everything that's gotten us to this point, it's the best of all the options we have left. This is our last chance to stop everything from falling apart. Then, his voice lowered to almost a whisper. Our last chance to make things right. Then he stood up, his spine stiff with conviction. So, in the end, there is only one thing we can do. What? Fu asked curiously. Let's protect those we hold dear. Let's trust our friends and family. And let's keep everyone from realizing that we're really just playing craps and betting big. Then her eyes sparkled. But we will win. Believe it, Aqua felt slightly and turned to return, while behind him, their leader disappeared in the blink of an eye. Tierra del Fuego, Tor del Okage, 12 years after the birth of Naruto. Then, Iruka-sensei will be fine. It had been quite an eventful night, the third cage reflected. Naruto had been tricked by Mizuki into committing treason. Fortunately, everything had turned out better than he could have imagined. And now his adopted grandson was impatiently standing in front of his desk while waiting for news about Umino Iruka. Yes, Naruto assured him of the third cage. Cage with a fatherly smile as she put away the forbidden scroll. The doctors assured me that he will be completely fine in a few days. By the way, I am very proud of how you behaved there against Mizuki. Iruka was right, he has proved that you are a ninja, blushing. A little while smiling, Naruto proudly touched his new blade forehead protector. That had once been Iruka's until he proved his worth. Hehe. Yes, wanting to address the issue before Naruto, to show his concern, Irizen Sarutobi sat down in his chair, with a more serious look. And Naruto, I'm sorry you had to find out that way about the Kubi. Naruto blinked at that, but quickly put on another bright smile. Don't worry. I'm sure you had your reasons. And that won't stop me from being Okage. Believe it, but the third Kage had still seen the brief emotions in his eyes, including the pain. He noticed the fragility behind that smile. I am sure you will, he praised, but still I am very sorry that this happened to you. It was always my intention for you to know the truth, but never in this way. I wanted you to find your own way as a child before becoming aware of this burden, so that you would have the opportunity to prove to yourself and everyone else that you were more than just the cage that marked our worst nightmare. A compliment and a statement of faith, which seemed to be working as the boy's happiness became more sincere. Even though the world girl is what it is, or maybe because of the way it usually is, being honest is what helps the most, even if it's not the whole truth. However, that can wait for later. Thank you, old man. I will. Naruto shouted. I'll get over you. And then I'll make all the people in this village recognize how amazing I am. Very well, Naruto, I'm looking forward to it, the Okage promised, except now it was his own cheerful expression that he was faking, while hiding an old pain. Yes, the will of the fire burns brightly inside you, just like your parents. Bright enough that maybe you'll be ready for the full story of your life before I die. Coast of Tierra del Fuego, in front of the Land of Waves. The following weeks, Naruto tried to stay still while he and the rest of the team. Team 7 were waiting for the boat to approach the shore that would take them to Tezuna's homeland, where the bridge builder was to finish his best creation. After a failed attempt to end his life, he had confessed the truth of this mission. Fortunately for the old man, he and the Genin, full of childish enthusiasm, had managed to convince the more cynical Kakashi to continue with the mission. Naruto, in particular, was determined to show everyone, and in particular himself, what he was really capable of. Especially after how he had frozen in front of those two renegade ninja, the Demon Brothers. I'll show you all. I will defeat anyone who comes near us, and I will show Sasuke Baka what I am really capable of. Sakura will be very impressed. I bet even Kakashi will show me some cool ninjutsu, and it will be Okage in no time. Besides, we are going to rescue a country from a ruthless tyrant. I can't wait to tell Iruka-sensei and the old man. Things like that will make everyone look at me and say I should be the next Okage. Sasuke Uchiha was just as anxious as his idiot teammate. Every day, every available hour, he had dedicated himself to getting stronger. He was striving to overcome the gap that man had on tenacity and experience. He had tried to graduate early to enter real combat as soon as possible, except that since the last Great Ninja War, the academy had rarely graduated children early during peacetime, and had abolished that politics completely after that night. Finally, Sasuke had the opportunity to test himself in the field and make an accurate assessment of where he was at. Best of all, his confrontation with the Demon Brothers, two Chunin who were bigger, older, and more experienced, had paid off. Positive results. If Kakashi hadn't intervened, he probably would have even beaten them both. Although Sasuke was willing to admit that regardless of his superior skill, a single mistake could have meant getting cut by one of those poison weapons, so maybe it was for the best. Now, however, the tests were only going to get harder. As it should be. The only question is how much these other two will stand in my way. Everything they've done so far indicates they'll just be a nuisance. Neither of them was able to move during that attack. Sakura, well, she kept thinking in her head how fantastic her beloved Sasuke-kun had been. His speed, his skill, his absolute coolness. Any thoughts about how abysmal his own contribution had been were overlooked. Besides, they were still just Chunin, right? Sakura knew that the goal of being there was for them to learn how to handle such situations. Right. As for attack Kakashi, Leader of this cheerful band of misfits called Team 7, he kept his own feelings hidden. The posture relaxed, and his only visible eye projected a distant attitude. While Tazuna had told his tale of woe, Kakashi had been closely watching the reactions of the so-called demon brothers as they sat bound, to help confirm the old man's story. Then a quick jolt of lightning chakra, which had suitably impressed his little one. I had knocked them out. Then Kakashi had left a note with the two aspirants, aware that a patrol would be coming through the area in the not-too-distant future. No, there were no problems behind them. What was waiting for them was the problem, since the next assassination attempt would probably be much more serious. And then there was Naruto. Kakashi had observed the boy from afar, but Kakashi was now beginning to suspect that distancing himself from him had caused bigger scars for his sensei's son than he imagined. The social isolation the boy had endured had even stunted his development as a girl. As much as he wanted to be Kage, it was still just one step in his main goal of being noticed, of having his existence recognized. So, he spent most of his time doing stunts, like making jokes or running around in Kilmyorans. Despite being a ninja, maybe it was the Academy's fault. They were overemphasizing on ninjutsu cool, like spitting fire, instead of sneaking up on someone who was sleeping to slit their throat, when he could have been studying and training. Maybe if there had been someone else in Naruto's life, someone to help him, motivate him, support him, or even gently but firmly push him to come back. Normally, things could have been different. It's not that we haven't tried to give him that, except every time something interfered with that. It's really fascinating how often something comes up that ruins those plans. Not that Kakashi could prove anything, especially since those problems had come from so many different sources. And neither he nor the Hokage could find any evidence of coordination between them. It was even possible that some of those problems were as innocent as they seemed, although there is still something that smells bad. Anyway, as Naruto progresses, if there is something sinister behind this, then they will have to come to light more often. And we will catch them. And once Naruto is strong enough and mature enough to learn about his family, his legacy, then I'm sure things will get better for him. Actually, being on Team 7 only helped a little to improve the situation. Naruto had people who recognized him on a daily basis, and the effect of this was noticeable, but it was not entirely healthy. Kakashi could be nothing more than a master and commander, someone who might have to send Naruto to his death. And not the father figure Naruto so desperately wanted. Even being a male role model was ruled out, as Kakashi was self-aware enough to know that he was too damaged to be a positive one. Iruka was still more of an older brother that Naruto saw less of now, and the third Kage was too old and usually too busy. Sakura's responses to Naruto's actions tended to be violent, but since she was really responding to him, he kept coming back. Her social isolation even made him feel a romantic attraction for her due to the fact that it was at least some attention. As for Sasuke, things just got complicated there. Kakashi and other Anbu had noticed how obsessed Naruto had been with Sasuke after the Uchiha massacre, seeing someone else who was also lonely in life, and with whom Naruto empathized. Unfortunately, Sasuke's obsession with killing his brother Majoritachi left no time for friends. So instead, Naruto focused on becoming Sasuke's rival, so that the young genius would recognize him. In Kakashi's eyes, the incident in which Naruto had stabbed his hand only highlighted the seriousness of the situation. Naruto's lack of concern about self-harming and his inability to realize how abnormally fast he was already healing were signs of a serious lack of concern for himself, as well as a complete inexperience. As for how quickly other people were healing because of the lack of interaction to really learn that. Even worse, no one else on Team 7 had ever felt particularly annoyed by Naruto. Yes, they had been surprised that he had taken such an extreme measure. But neither Sakura nor Sasuke had cared too much about his personal health while he had a crib and almost completely pierced his hand. As for Kakashi, although he was a little disappointed that Naruto had frozen, he wasn't surprised. Unlike Sasuke, Naruto had never been in a life or death situation until recently, with Mizuki. That reaction on his first mission was perfectly understandable. Showing his commitment through such a serious self-harm had been a bit disconcerting, although Kakashi had tried to hide it. But it was still good to see that Naruto's spirit was not daunted. Sasuke's unique focus on revenge was another reason why Kakashi emphasized teamwork exercises instead of developing his Junin as fighters and assassins. This was a philosophy that Konoha emphasized, and the fact was that Sasuke had too much potential to waste because he charged alone and missed the kunai coming from his blind spot. He somehow assumed that he could develop the necessary skills to kill Itachi on his own without anyone being there to support him and help counter Itachi's own abilities. It was especially ridiculous because Sasuke's own abilities until now were simply inferior versions of Itachi's, meaning he could never surprise his most experienced enemy. Sasuke also assumed that he would somehow cross paths with Itachi, as Kakashi's covert observations had given no indication that the boy had developed any ability to track one of the most notorious criminals in modern history. A man who had casually avoided the hunter ninjas sent after him for so long that the third Kage had finally accepted defeat and called them back. Only teammates could balance Sasuke's talents and bring out his true potential. Unfortunately, Kakashi knew that if he said that to the boy in such a direct way, they would only be seen as pawns and thus weaken the group as a whole. Sasuke had to learn and accept this on his own initiative. The only problem was that I still didn't respect Sakura or Naruto enough to understand it. Hopefully, time would correct that, and maybe this mission would help in that, as they would be thrown into danger together. Perceived danger in any case, as Kakashi had little intention of letting such threats reach them. Sakura was a much simpler and more normal case. She had entered a life she wasn't really ready for, but one of the reasons Kakashi had accepted a C-rank mission was to see how her adorable Junin reacted when her beloved sensei and role model. He massacred a group of bandits while splashing the audience with blood and viscera. A little more humane than sending them straight into danger in a way that wasn't worth losing. The lives of bandits and similar scum weren't worth consideration, and their psychological reactions would give you a good idea of whether you should or not to let them continue as girls. Well, as it was, spending time with her crush for an extended period would inevitably take some of the shine off her obsession with him. The fanatics tended to lose their idealism after seeing the object of their desires get dirty and smell as bad as them. From camping in the woods 4 days at a time, not to mention that she might finally realize that Sasuke wasn't interested in romance right now. Mental trauma aside, he was 12 years old after all. In truth, the only reason the demon brothers were still alive was because it wasn't every day that new sources of information came to the outskirts of their village. But this could be a bit extreme. No, I'll protect them. I am Kakashi Attack of the Sharingan Eye, and I doubt that cat have a mob strong enough to challenge me. There is no need to bother the third Kage with reinforcements. In addition, a little hostile murderous intent will also be a good criterion. Mount Miboku. While resting at home among the other toads, Gamatora was meditating. For years he had been doing his duty covertly, and it was becoming clear that his friend's last wish might be in vain. The forces opposing Minato's son were too great. When he swore this task for the 4th season, he did not realize the obstacles he would face to deliver the scroll to Naruto. The first and main problem was that the boy was not ready yet. Presenting the scroll to him before he spent some time at the Ninja Academy had seemed imprudent to him, as he would lack the necessary knowledge to actually use the secrets contained in the scroll. So Gamatora had stayed on the sidelines, carefully gathering information from the toads that were associated with Jiraiya. While he was disappointed that Jiraiya had been deemed incapable of taking care of his godson, both by himself and by other parties, including the third Kage, the wise toad kept busy protecting the child from afar. Repeatedly, the man had intercepted and discredited any information gathered by foreign nations regarding the identity of the nine-tailed Hinshiriki, as well as any superficial resemblance between the Joker and main pariah of the blade and Minato Namikaze. Kakashi, the apprentice of the 4th, had been active in hunting down these spies, ruthlessly exterminating any threat to his sensei's legacy. Gamatora had also gained more information by using the distant body of water from Mount Miboku to travel to the village and monitor the boy and those around him. But the tragedy was that the child grew up in almost absolute social isolation. No one dared to harm the boy, not even to be found out thinking about it, after what Jiraiya had done to the man who had criminally revealed Naruto's burden to the world. However, at the same time, No one could be forced to approach the child, talk to him, or even smile at him. It was clear that loneliness was burdening the child, robbing him of social cues and knowledge, and leading him to develop some unhealthy ideas. If I were to give him the scroll right now, it would be a disaster, Gamatora reflected with a heavy heart. He would simply show it to the world, in a desperate attempt to get more people to recognize him. Or even worse, if Naruto's suffering was greater than I suspect, the information contained in the scroll would give the young Hinchiriki. At least now he knows that it is his, as well as because people hate him so much. The opportunity to execute a bloody revenge on the village if he ever got angry. No doubt, this would provide ironic satisfaction for the preteen. If he was going to be rejected and treated like a monster, let him be one. To hell with humanity. And the legacy of the fourth Hokage would be death, the death of many villagers, and the eventual death of Naruto. When the ninja finally killed him, all assuming, of course, that Naruto didn't try to unlock his prison and release the Nine Tails before he fell. Something has to change, Gamatora thought in dismay, and soon. But I don't know what to do. Land of Waves, battle next to a small lake. It seems appropriate that the rumors that shook the ninja world until its foundations have begun in such a small and insignificant nation. One that everyone else had discarded, the Land of Waves. It was here, on blood-spattered battlefields, that new legends were born. And where these defining individuals took their first true steps on these new paths. And it all started with Zabuza Momoki, the demon of the bloody mist, fighting the equally famous Kakashi Sharingan I attack, also known as the ninja copy. Unbeknownst to the Leaf Ninja, however, Zabuza had a few up her sleeve. As her living tool silently watched events unfold from the surrounding foliage. This tool was called a Kuyuki, and was the voluntary servant of the demon, willing to die in his service if necessary. The observer listened in silence to what was happening, catching every now and then a glimpse through the mist that lifted when his master summoned him. Gato, the shipping magnate, had hired them to kill a bridge builder named Tazuna, in order to maintain the former's commercial monopoly over the country of waves. Unfortunately, Tazuna had gone to the village hidden in the leaves for an escort, and was under the protection of Captain Jonin Kakasiatake. Oh, and 3 kids who were definitely his Fin students. It was clear that Zabuza-sama was starting his basic counterattack psychological warfare strategy. At the same time, the timeless game of clones and substitutions was starting. The rules were simple: both parties would switch places at high speed with any nearby object they could, while also making sure that any seemingly lethal blow would actually only hit one of their doubles, all to catch his opponent off guard. The cat and the mouse, the cloud ruler and the chicken, all rolled into one, and the first one to be gutted was the loser. This was how the higher-ranked ninjas tended to fight, using jutsus that they mastered. To the point where few or no hand gestures were necessary, high speeds, every bit of experience, careful handling of the chakra. During situations of a lot of stress, skill and knowledge with several clone jutsus, and repeated use of the substitution technique while simultaneously trying to locate and anticipate their opponent's new locations, while he was using it himself. In this kind of battles, especially near the decisive end, neither side could be sure that the so-called final blow had really connected, unless it was another clone or substitution. From the little that Aku was able to gain by enhancing his senses with chakra, and from his past experience with Zabuza-sama, it seemed that Atake had now confirmed that Zabuza-sama was a user of the water style. He liked to rely on low-level clones. He had some skill with Zabuza-sama's sword, and knew that the man's reputation for killing quietly was well-deserved. Zabuza-sama's first fight with a Sharingan user was already giving her an idea of how it worked, including the fact that the fog she was creating with the hiding in the fog technique was apparently not strong enough to block its effects. The speed of attack in coming to Sujman's aid was also revealing. But the most important thing was that Aku was learning as much as he could from the glimpses of the battle, in case he was forced to intervene in the fight. Defeating the attack itself was unthinkable, as Zabuza-sama had to prove to himself that he was strong enough to defeat the enemy Jonin. Otherwise, how did he expect to defeat someone as strong as Yagura, the 4th Mizukage? No, Aku would only get involved to fake his master's death, and even then, only so that Zabuza-sama could come back stronger than ever. Finally, ending the annoying dance, Zabuza kicked an attack towards the nearby lake. However, the swordsman realized that the copy ninja had chosen to go with the flow of the kick instead of blocking it, creating distance. and trying to get him away from the children and the old man. Against a man of the attacking reputation, and based on the skills he had already displayed, Zabuza would be expected to prioritize the biggest threat, not sparing an instant to target the old man he had been tasked with. Murder or the brats. And of course, Attack had managed to drop some thistles as a trap, forcing Zabuza to hesitate. But he is an arrogant fool if he plans to lure me into a field in which I specialize in using weapons. Faster than Attack could react, Zabuza caught the fake legend in A's prison technique. Water. It's over, Aku knew it. Zabuza-sama is also pouring his own chakra into the jutsu to prevent Attack from using any of those lightning jutsu he is so famous for. He may have the physical conditioning to hold his breath for a long time, but Zabuza-sama's chakra levels are up to the task of maintaining the jutsu. All that's left is to kill Tazuna and those Jinin so that no witnesses will be available for the hidden blade. Maybe I can convince Zabuza-sama to forgive the children. Perhaps if I point out to him the retribution that his village may try to bring down on us. No, it's wait. Maybe he already decided to do this, and that's why he's just playing with them, giving them a chance to escape. It was still sad to see the ends of the blade getting ready to fight with someone who outclassed him to a ridiculous degree. With a slight surprise, Aku watched the short, blonde guy cheer on his teammates. Despite the orders to flee that their superior spent his precious air to desperately yell at them to just run. However, the boy definitely had guts, shouting his defiance and insulting a man who so far had not made any serious attempts to kill any of them. Yes, a certain courage and daring. Skill and intelligence, not so much. He made that accusation against a Jonin captain, even if he was just a water clone, to get his headband back. To help you in your statement that it would be Okage. Well, that's interesting at least. However, the boy's use of a cloning technique capable of creating so many solid copies was more fascinating. Especially since Aku could not confirm what its composition was. Not that it made a real difference, as the copies were casually dispelled by Zabuza-sama's Kubikwiribo, the executioner's sword. Undaunted, and even when he was sent to skate on the floor, the boy, Naruto Uzumaki, it was, passed a big Fuma shuriken to his teammate, the black-haired guy who had an interesting clan shield on his back. Anyway, he chose to throw the shuriken at the real Zabuza-sama, not the water clone that had been humiliating them. There is a second shuriken, hidden under the first one, for a shadow shuriken technique. Although it's not enough to hinder Zabuza-sama, it's still a better plan than I thought they would have. He also has a decent ability to throw it that way, which explains why he was the one who received the shuriken. Ah, there we have it, and so what? Aku watched in disbelief as Zabuza effortlessly caught the first shuriken and jumped on the second. Only for the latter to disappear in a flash of smoke to reveal the young Uzumaki trying to surprise his target from behind. A masterful plan that made it possible for Jin to cut one of the 7 ninja swordsmen of the mist. But what was that technique? Had he really changed his shape to a different solid object instead of just an illusory cover? Who is that guy? Aku asked himself. He's acting like a suicidal idiot, but it has potential. Unfortunately, if he kept rushing like that, he would be killed before he had a chance to unlock it. Shocked, the young ice release user almost lost Kakashi breaking free from his prison when an enraged Zabuza-sama withdrew his arm from the water ball to retaliate, and the ninja Copia charged forward to protect her student, releasing all her murderous intent to make her target nervous. Naruto Sensei Jonin praised, after throwing said child to dry land where the rest of his precious Team 7 was, your plan was brilliant. You've grown up, all of you. Naruto, laughing, continued to explain exactly how he had carried out his plan. I'll have to teach him not to explain his plans to the enemy, Kakashi pointed out. So, Zabuza mused, you sent me into such a rage that I undid the jutsu that held the water prison together. No. You didn't drop your own jutsu. It was broken from the outside. Deciding that the Sharingan Genjutsu he was carefully placing over Zabuza as they stared at each other with murderous fierceness was ready enough, Kakashi decided to get down to business. Just so you know, the same jutsu won't work on me twice. Jumping back, Kakashi roared at the man who had dared to try to kill his students. You said it yourself, Zabuza. I'm a man famous for copying thousands of techniques. It's time you understood what that means. Humph, and how many of them? Those are just useless range of. Ignoring him, Kakashi went on the offensive like a vengeful wolf. Kakashi quickly pierced through the hand seals for the water bullet technique, causing a powerful torrent of water to burst out of the lake beside him, rushing straight towards Zabuza. The assassin countered with more water clones, which approached Kakashi, and although several were destroyed when Kakashi redirected his attack, enough were able to dodge him to reach their target. Knowing that they would lack the power of the original, Kakashi decided to dispatch him only with a kunai, deliberately leaving his back exposed as a feint, even while dodging the cutting swords to dispel the doppelgangers. Not being fooled by this false opportunity, the real Zabuza decided to attack from the front and from below, coming out of the lake, while brandishing the executioner's sword, while planning to cut both his clones and the ninja captain, without to know that his target had anticipated this. Sorry, Zabuza, you may be stronger and faster than me, but it's not enough to overcome my Sharingan. And as an added bonus, 8 doors, first door, opening door. Zabuza couldn't help but swear to himself in disbelief as Kakashi countered his underwater ambush somehow, possessing the strength to block the swordsman's huge sword with nothing but a kunai knife. While fighting the Leaf Child, the Xmes suddenly lost his balance even more as the lake seemed to dissolve into a whirlpool. Zabuza struggled to regain his wits as the lake seemed to be consuming itself as it rapidly receded. What? No. He's using a clone and an earth jutsu to drain the lake. Even though he was a skilled leader, a master swordsman and assassin, the Mist Demon's water jutsu skills were not up to par. That's why he had waited to attend to an ambush for them by a water fountain. Pre-existing water that I could draw from. Kakashi, on the other hand, was primarily a lightning user who also had skill with ground techniques, meaning he was altering geography to favor himself, especially since he wouldn't have to. Worrying that the water would conduct your electricity in some way you wouldn't want to. Even more worryingly, for some strange reason, Zabuza felt a little weird, taking advantage of a brief respite while the two groups separated after another clash of weapons. And bending down to dodge a pair of shuriken that Kakashi had thrown, Zabuza turned on his chakra in case he was under a genjutsu. But no. He felt no difference. Something's still wrong. But what? Poison. This is bad, Aku thought grimly with his eyes wide open, still hidden from view. Zabuza-sama can't take her eyes off the Sharingan. It's almost like I'm under some kind of genjutsu. No, wait, he is. Attack must be skillful enough to make one subtle enough that Zabuza-sama won't notice he's under one, and strong enough that routine interruptions of his chakra network won't work. Maybe a multi-layered genjutsu. Zabuza has to disappear back into the fog if he wants to win, except now that his temper is upset. He's too obsessed with direct combat. Realizing the likely outcome of this fight, Aku began to move forward stealthily, aiming at a tree that would give him a panoramic view of the fight, while standing close to where he predicted which way the general flow of the battle. Meanwhile, Zabuza-sama exchanged a water element bullet, Water Dragon, with Kakashi's equally massive one. Zabuza-sama feels that he has learned enough about attacking, and with his anger intensifying his impatience. He is pulling out the big guns, and on the attack he is matching it. No, he's copying it. He is very slight, but his Sharingan allows him to imitate any physical movement that Zabuza-sama performs. What followed was chilling for Aku as he witnessed his teacher becoming vulnerable to the psychological warfare of the attack itself, who used his mimicry to put on nervous to his enemy and then act as if he was reading his mind by completing the sentences of Zabuza-sama himself. Knowing that the Leaf Boy was preparing his final blow, Aku pulled out 2 needles on Bon, preparing to fake his master's death by aiming at his neck to put him into a coma. It was risky, but Aku had done it before, allowing his master to return to kill his enemies. Once even to snatch the reward the man was trying to collect for killing Zabuza-sama. Aku's teacher had been laughing for days about that. And if attack smelled something strange, tired as he was after such an exhausting fight, Aku should be able to beat him easily. Zabuza-sama would forgive him. Kakashi attack of the Sharingan, I felt a small satisfaction when he finally managed to put Zabuza in checkmate. Using multiple illusions to manipulate him, the man had resorted to his most powerful water jutsu, water element, great waterfall technique. But Kakashi's superior vision and his psychological warfare allowed him to read the movements that Zabuza would make before he took them to Corporal, which made it easier for Kakashi to launch his attack first. The crushing force of the water caused the man's battered body to rush through the air to hit a tree trunk. Taking out some kunai, Kakashi prepared a standard series to finish off a living legend, aiming 3 at the torso and 1 at the neck. Then he stopped when 2 senbon needles suddenly appeared in the swordsman's throat, seemingly out of nowhere. Kakashi looked up and increased his chakra in case it was a genjutsu. He blinked in surprise at the sight of a masked member of Vladimist's Ambu Hunter operations. The young man offered a polite apology for interfering, claiming that he wanted to kill him himself. Based on his build and voice, he was dealing with someone only slightly older than Kakashi's own students. Except that he had still risen to claim one of the most elite positions within the ninja world. An order tasked with hunting their prey alone, eliminating any lost girls they found without anyone watching their backs. He's not an average kid, that's for sure. I'm pretending, but I'm reaching my limit. And the longer this lasts, the longer I will have to keep my Sharingan active and consume more chakra. Zabuza's death is the only thing that matters. I won't be able to take his corpse to study. Carefully approaching the man in question, while keeping an eye on the motionless Ambu Hunter, Kakashi checked Zabuza's pulse for half a minute, confirming that he was indeed a corpse. Unexpectedly, Naruto ran towards them, shouting his confusion about who that masked stranger was, and whether his casual killing of the Bloody Mist demon meant that the Team 7 members sucked. Without losing sight of the new potential threat, Kakashi approached and calmed Naruto. "Oh well, you have my sympathy," he said to his student. "I can see that something like that would be difficult to accept, but it's a fact you'll have to live with. This probably won't be the last time we meet a boy who is younger than you and stronger than me." Kakashi could have given more details about it, except that unfortunately, the best examples of young prodigies in the recent history of the village hidden among the leaves were the same. It would be too arrogant to mention it. Itachi Uchiha, it's unwise to mention him for a number of reasons, and Orochimaru a third bad role model. Perhaps in retrospect, I should have kept my mouth shut. For his part, Aku, still in his Ambu Hunter costume, jumped up and picked up the unconscious body of Zabuza-sama. A glance had confirmed that the senbon had been accurately placed, but this moment of vulnerability was when everything was at greatest risk. Fortunately, the attacking body language indicated that he had no interest in fighting. Moreover, based on the copier boy's previous behavior and his current closeness to his Jinrubyo, it was likely that his priority was to protect his GS from any active threat, not to retrieve the corpses. "Your battle is over, live, for now. And now I must get rid of the remains," he lied, "so that they do not reveal our secrets to our enemies. Well, then I must go. Wave Land, a Team 7 cleanse, having recovered from his death well enough to move. And remove the senbon from his throat, though not enough to actually move," Zabuza looked up to. Looking at his tool. "You saw the whole fight, didn't you?" Aqua felt with her head. Although Kakashi attack is a formidable enemy, from what he showed, he is only a threat if you face him head-on, Zabuza-sama. His students were also interesting. Zabuza frowned at this, but he knew that Aku was right. The trick that the blonde brat had played on him, albeit with the help of the other guy, had been brilliant. If the dwarf had been even a little more skilled, he could have hurt Zabuza when he left him blind. Hell, if the kid had only had a long-range, offensive C-rank jutsu when I had my back to him, or a better throwing arm, he might have even killed me. That's how unprepared he was. And those jutsu I was using beforehand. The swordsman frowned. The brat had been spouting some nonsense at some point, but Zabuza had just ignored him, thinking that even if he didn't kill them all, to avoid Liz's retaliation for her youngsters, they couldn't possibly have anything. Interesting thing to say. What did you find out about them? The one with black hair has the symbol of the clan on his back, which I think is the Ucha. Although I'll have to check my scrolls to see if I can verify it. As for the other guy, how much did you hear him say? Zabuza did not respond to the diplomatic rebuke, as he always stressed the importance of full and honest feedback. He identified himself as Naruto Uzumaki. At this, Zabuza paused, while she put on the bandages on her face. In the ninja world, weapons with special powers, such as Orochimaru's Kusanagi sword, were priceless. The art of making them was practically lost during the brutal Warring States period, as the craftsmen capable of creating such artifacts were the main targets. The last recorded individual capable of doing so was the Lord, the second time. However, most of the remaining weapons were wielded by the 7 Mist Ninja Swordsmen, a group that Zabuza still considered himself a part of. Those particular swords came from a variety of sources, and some of the current ones were even replacements for the ones destroyed during previous battles. Despite this, most of them came from the seal-loving Uzumaki clan of Uziagagakure, the village hidden by the whirlpools. They had been handed over as part of peace treaties after wars, or torn from their dead hands on the battlefield. Unfortunately, there were no more Uzumaki left after the fall of Uziagagakure at the hands of Ibagakure. Or so Zabuza had thought. Now, while it was possible that the boy was lying, or that he had been lied to, since he seemed too stupid to be subtle, Zabuza suspected that he really was an Uzumaki. It seemed unlikely that someone like Kakashi Attack would tolerate such a deception. In addition, the brat's study partner seemed to be an Ucha. Zabuza fully trusted the memory of his student, another legendarily powerful clan that was supposed to be dead. Except for his executioner, of course. So, putting the last survivors of 2 legendary clans under someone as an attack made sense, especially considering their own Sharingan. What did that say about the girl with the pink hair? His behavior was just to catch him off guard. Interesting, very interesting indeed. Zabuza pondered. Anyway, it doesn't matter. I am a ninja with a contract, and I will fulfill it. Zabuza turned to look at his apprentice. I didn't look for the shadows and knives hiding in the fog, and I almost paid for it with my life, he growled, wincing as his battered body screamed in pain. That won't happen again. Aku, we need more information. Get it. His tool obediently nodded again in agreement, no doubt having come to the same conclusion long before Zabuza. The perfect weapon, Land of Waves, Tazuna's house, as she slowly recovered. Mind, Kakashi began to carefully plan his campaign against whoever Gato sent to kill Tazuna next. A minute after Ambu's hunter had left, and who, in retrospect, was probably an imposter. Kakashi had collapsed from using his Sharingan too much and depleting too much chakra. He would probably need a week of rest for a full recovery, which was about the same amount of time he calculated. It would take for Zabuza to recover if he had actually been put into the death-like state. Also, Cat would need at least a few days to find some new muscle to ship. Meanwhile, his Jin needed to become stronger and faster to deal with the lackeys that the former Fog Ninja would bring with him. Consequently, the Team 7 training program would have to be accelerated. So, to start, I would ask them to do the tree climbing exercise to improve their chakra control and increase their reserves. Well, I kinda failed in my plan to keep the kids out of it. Still, they exceeded my expectations, so maybe they can handle what's to come. Zabuza was a captain of Anbu hunters before he joined the 7 swordsmen, but they still pulled that prank on him, even though one of them evidently forgot everything he should have learned in school. I mean, honestly, how could Naruto need a remedial lesson on what the chakra is? This is as basic as the importance of stealth, which you seem to have forgotten as well. Fine. Still, they are improving at a phenomenal rate, Kakashi assured himself. Sure, that I'm just starting to teach them ninjutsu while they're in the middle of a rank mission. Might seem a little irresponsible to some people, except that they can clearly handle it. And anyway, I'm still clearly stronger than Zabuza. Whatever future threats we face on this mission, they should continue to focus on me. All I have to do is make sure my sweet little grin, incredibly, there was barely a hint of sarcasm, are strong enough to stay with life long enough for me to take care of the matter and come to take down whoever they're dealing with. Land of Waves, forest, not far from Tazuna's house. Aku's silent observations had been going well so far, using a combination of ice mirrors to infiltrate and observe, as well as his mastery of stealth to survive. Even to Kakashi attack. However, he had been very cautious with such a legendary shinobi, so he had only caught a few details. However, what had been discovered so far was still rewarding. First, the copy girl was obviously more hurt than he looked when Ha was gone. Evidently, the Sharingan demanded a lot of chakra from him. In addition, his Genin team seemed to be receiving elemental training in chakra control and increasing their stamina. Although it is strange that they are just starting with that. They are 12 years old, and they are his students. They should have known that a long time ago. Or is that how the sheet teaches? Aku decided to take a break today and went out to get some herbs to help Zabuza-sama heal. The man shouldn't have any more problems after Aku broke Gato's arm as a warning. Besides, Attack was still too busy recovering to go out and explore. After a lot of thought, Aku chose the kimono he would wear for this outing. She chose a beautiful sleeveless pink kimono with pale red edges and decorated with small plum-colored swirls. It looked just beautiful on her. Although he would never admit it to anyone else, picking on people was one of Aku's hobbies, and that included being an effeminate guy, capable of confusing people without any discernible effort. However, her favorite practice was to dress up as a girl. Not only was it funny to watch people treat him like a helpless, innocent little girl, but their reactions when they found out he was actually a man were just hilarious. Only Zabuza was not afraid of it, and that was because he had been close to his tool for so long. As long as the dress had concealed weapons on it, it was fine. Although the man was probably reassured by the fact that Aku managed to flirt with a lot of girls quite often. After a while of wandering around the forest, collecting the necessary plants, Aku came across an unexpected vision. The self-proclaimed future Hokage, Naruto Uzumaki, who had successfully confronted the Blood Mist Demon long enough to free his master and superior. Someone who had frankly abysmal chakra control, based on previous espionage, but he also had the wits to trick Zabuza-sama, as well as some interesting jutsu. Unlike a proper child, he had a loud personality and a fashion choice, and yet, he was able to rise to the challenge of overcoming even Zabuza-sama's fearsome aura and murderous intent. And yet, there he was now, sleeping, in the middle of the forest, when he was supposed to be protecting his client from potential assassins. By the way, have you really been out all night? Why haven't any of your team members come looking for you? Is it all an act, or is it really an accumulation of contradictions? Slowly, Aku extended his hand towards the boy. It would be so easy, wouldn't it? Breaking her neck like I did with the cat arm. I wouldn't even feel anything. Who am I kidding? Naruto woke up with a gentle jolt and opened his eyes to see the most beautiful girl he had ever seen, with her pale face framed by long thick brown hair. Belatedly she realized that he was telling her in such a lovely voice that she would catch a cold if she slept out in the open on a morning like that. She sat up suddenly to hide her blush, and then gallantly asked him what he was doing and if there was any way he could help her. The morning passed while Naruto was helping the strange girl, who introduced herself as Aku. She was a local girl, and she was gathering some medicines to help an injured friend. Naruto, who was not used to someone listening to him and responding to him, was glad to be able to talk while they were working. Finally, their conversation turned to Gato and the difficulties in the country of waves. Aku was evasive about it, but in a way he knew that she was uncomfortable talking about the difficulties she was going through. It was also clear that she was an orphan, and apart from her friend, she lived alone to a large extent. You too, huh? Aku blinked in surprise at her statement. I'm an orphan too. Still, things have improved a lot in my life. It seems that things have been the same for you, if you have a friend to help you too. As if feeling uncomfortable with the direction the conversation was taking, Aku looked away for a moment before asking, so, what were you doing? In the middle of nowhere at dawn. Training. He burst out with an expression that was somehow comical and serious at the same time. With a look of surprise, he asked more, really? That headband you're wearing, are you some kind of girl? Why is that? He screamed. Do you think I look like one? Do I believe it? Really? Because I am. He definitely has some self-esteem issues, or, at the very least, he's looking for attention. Especially with that bright orange color, he diagnosed Q. Wow, that's amazing. He laughed gratefully as his ego was stroked. What are you training for? To strengthen me, but you look so strong and manly already. Blatant lie, with the subtle signs of slight malnutrition and the aforementioned horrible orange clothes. Actually, Aku was only saying this because it made being a guy dressed as a girl even more fun. Besides, people missed more things when their braggadocio was encouraged. Right. Right? Then, in a slightly lower voice, he added, I have to be much stronger than this. Aku stared in silence for a moment, trying to decipher the person in front of him. While impressing a pretty girl was obviously influencing what he was saying, there seemed to be a noticeable determination in his eyes. A willpower that Aku had come to expect from older, more experienced ninjas. In order to investigate further, but why? To become the leader of my hometown. All the people who used to treat me like trash will have to say, he's the #1 ninja. And right at this moment, I have to prove something to a certain person I know. Someone who thinks there are no heroes in this world anymore, but I will prove my worth to him by saving this country from Cat. And whoever he sends for me. Once again, Aku stared at him silently but intensely. There was too much raw information in the boy's simple statements to analyze. Despite this, it was obvious that the Uzumaki boy was someone who had grown up alone and wanted to prove his worth to those who had rejected him, to get him recognized. But why would the son of such a famous clan be rejected, especially in the Hidden Leaf? And his drive comes solely from his need to be noticed by everyone, or he really wants to prove his worth for his own sake. In addition, he still sees ninjas as heroes, people who can only help others and never harm the innocent. Is that how it is on the sheet? That their more peaceful philosophies allow them to believe that they are the good guys. And of course, without knowing it, he threw the glove at me, because Zabuza-sama and I will fight him and his friends later. What an interesting conversation is this turning out to be. All this passed through his mind in an instant. Upon making a snap judgment, the killer decided he wanted to learn more from Naruto, and chose to open up more to his own life to do so. Are you doing this for the sake of that person, or for your own satisfaction? Naruto only returned his gaze with narrowed eyes, a silly look that completely portrayed his incomprehension. What? Everything was so ridiculous, Aku couldn't help the childish giggle that escaped him, causing Naruto to ask out loud what was so funny. While keeping that stupid squint, finally, Aku regained self-control. Do you have someone special in your life? In retrospect, Aku had to admit that, given his deliberately childish attitude, that could be misinterpreted as something flirtatious. Which possibly showed that Zabuza-sama's sadism had rubbed off on her a bit. But not in the way his master would have wanted. Not at all. Just thinking about Zabuza-sama in this context brings Aku's memories to the fore. Oblivious to Naruto's confusion as the young girl stared into the void. Their father, a man who had sworn to love and protect them with his life as long as he lived, had found out that Aku's mother had a lineage ability. How that revelation somehow made, in his eyes, his family become monsters, and he had killed his wife for that. And he would have murdered his son too. Instead, the icy power of Aku's inheritance had instinctively risen up to save him and stain him with his father's blood. Still lost in his thoughts, he found himself reliving his life of loneliness on the streets, with no one to love him. Without a reason to live, where every waking day was a struggle not to stay lying on the ground, until the end finally came, until that man appeared. With his hands also soaked in blood, both of sinners and innocent. Giving a worthless orphan a reason to live, to be happy, and the will to face each new dawn. With an effort, Aku turned away from his past to look at Naruto, a boy who could share a rather similar story. And perhaps his own personal philosophy, his way of being a ninja, with him. So, calmly and simply, he said, when people protect something that is really valuable to them, they can become so strong. As they should be, he could see that the blonde was getting lost in his thoughts in turn, as he reflected on his own experiences. In fact, Naruto remembered examples like Iruka's, and the day Naruto became a full-fledged ninja. Kakashi's words when they faced that eyebrowless monster, Zabuza, saying that he would not let any of his companions die. Stories like the one about the fourth Hokage defeating the nine-tailed fox, or Inari's father, Keiza, who Tazuna said believed and lived up to his philosophy of protecting something precious to you with all your might. Fortunately, Naruto seemed to have gotten the message. He smiled and nodded, yes. I know everything. With an answering smile, Aku got up with his basket of herbs and walked away. With one last parting comment, you will become stronger, and I hope we will meet again. In fact, Aku decided that it would be nice to talk to the young blonde again, although maybe next time I should tell her that I'm a guy. His reaction should be priceless. Land of Waves, forest just outside Tazuna's house. A few days later, Naruto could only sit with his mouth open. He had met Aku again when the boy had been collecting more herbs, this being their third meeting. Surely it was better than staying in the house with that Inari brat, even if what Kakashi had told the boy had calmed him down now. The future Hokage had come to really enjoy these moments when they were together, while chatting about everything under the sun. Aku couldn't stay too long, as he had to come back to help her, but they both had time to have a little laugh. However, as he was walking away this time, Aku, without even turning his head to look at Naruto, had informed the blonde that he was actually a boy. What? She is even more feminine than Sakura. She even talks like a little girl. Since then, Naruto had simply been sitting there, trying to go over everything they had said together. And he was also questioning his sexuality. Land of Waves, Zabuza's hideout. Zabuza moment. Mochi nodded his head in agreement as his tool finished outlining the plan he believed his master should follow. Using an improved version of the concealment technique in the mist would be expensive in chakra, but jutsu would still be beneficial enough. It seemed that Kakashi had come to base his fighting style on his Sharingan, so robbing the man of his most fearsome weapon would make him nervous and limit his options. It would still require careful work on Zabuza's part, relying only on her hearing, except that was her weapon of choice. His observations during their first meeting would help him attack Kakashi psychologically. Also, that was one of the few areas in which he still surpassed Aku, due to his more mundane experience. Although perhaps he should consider looking for another tool of his own age, Zabuza mused. A partner or someone to interact with. Someone to help you learn more about people. Besides, the 7 swordsmen were always better as a team. Herm and Aqua has been enjoying spending time with that Uzumaki guy. I would say too much, but there is potential there. Zabuza quickly hardened his heart and corrected his chain of thoughts. They would have to be willing to be my tool, of course. And only to help Aqua become a better killer. Seeing his Prit-G walking away to prepare his own weapons and the necessary materials for the traps, if the first plan failed, Zabuza admitted that there was another reason to find another partner. Thus, if the master died, his tool would not be left alone in the world. Zabuza had ordered Aku to never take his own life if the first one died, to keep living. But the boy had based his whole life on the older man. Father figure, mentor, leader, and sole purpose of existence, how the child would cope without his owner in his life. Aku could take on Zabuza's goals and ambitions, except it would be an empty commitment at best, as the boy defined himself by others. And what kind of swordsman would Zabuza be if he let his best weapon go to waste, rusting, if he wasn't around to carry it anymore? Previously, while Team 7 is preparing for their second round with Zabuza, Naruto has had several meetings with a mysterious boy named Aku before becoming friends with him. Of course, Aku let Naruto think that the first one was a girl for a while, just for fun. Land of Waves, the house of Tazuna. Kakashi Itachi took one last look at the perimeter before leaving with Sasuke and Sakura to protect Tazuna for the day. Naruto had worked himself to exhaustion again the night before, so he decided to let him sleep and rest completely. The bridge is almost finished, so Gato and his goons will have to do something soon. We can't risk any of us getting tired during a fight. I'll have to talk to Naruto tonight to tone it down a bit. Even their resistance has limits. Land of Waves, the bridge, under construction. Zabuza took one last look around the perimeter before nodding his head towards Aku. The stage was set for the coming confrontation. Today, she would strengthen her position in the world girl with the death of one of the living legends of the blade. And maybe even take the man's Sharingan. He had no interest in having such a cheap trick for himself, but if he lacked the ability to turn it into something available, and preserve his advantage somehow, he should abandon his ambitions. Aku calmly approached from behind, with the last of the construction workers leaning on his right shoulder. All of them were alive, unlike Aku's argument that a reputation for killing civilians would only hinder Zabuza and his ambitions. Killing enemy girls, preferably adults, was a more profitable image, and not just to get a stable income. Instead, the civilians had only been beaten and then put into states of death and left lying on the ground in prepared positions, to help make the attack Jin nervous, which in turn would make their master more vulnerable. Zabuza-sama, has the forest been covered? Yes, Aku. If anyone tries to come from the shore by any other way than the road, we will know about it. Are you still sure we shouldn't put something in the water? No. Anyway, I want him to be confined to the bridge. If it moves towards the water, I still have an advantage there. And you'll remember, only a long tolerance kept Zabuza from rolling her eyes. You'd think it was my mom instead of my gun. Without noticing the turn, he said, yes. I'll keep trying, and I'll hit the road, and I'll work to scare him off. Thank you, Zabuza-sama. A few minutes later, with a flash of kunai, Kakashi dispelled the ambush of Zabuza's water cones surrounding him. Only their incredible reflexes prevented the copies from taking down Kakashi's students and employer, with a massive, coordinated swing of their oversized swords. Seriously, Zabuza must have heard every possible variation that you are overcompensating, which there was. So he said, letting his voice be heard, you survived, Zabuza. With a sneer, Zabuza slowly emerged from the accumulated fog. Fearlessly, he looked Kakashi straight in the eyes, while the masked hunter from earlier showed his true loyalty. By walking alongside the blood mist demon. That's mine, Sasuke stated calmly, walking to the side, to stand directly in front of his nameless enemy. It was a great show that you put on before, but now we discovered you and I hate shitty actors. Sasuke is so cool, Sakura shouted, while Kakashi was dripping with sweat from the hypocritically dramatic that he was being Sasuke. Not to mention that Sakura defied everything Naruto said or did, but still took Sasuke completely at face value, without question. Accepting the invitation, Aku charged forward at high speed, and was surprised when Lucia seemed able to match him. Land of Waves, path leading to the bridge. Naruto ran towards the bridge, desperate to help his teammates. Shortly after waking up, two thugs attacked Tazuna's house. Fortunately, Naruto had seen a wild boar that had been slaughtered for fun on his way there and had returned, which meant he had been there to witness the courage Inari had shown in trying to stop those idiots. But if Gato is going after them, something must be happening on the bridge too. Land of Waves. The bridge, Sasuke slumped to the ground, his muscles sagging from the senbon needles piercing pressure points all over his whole body. When the masked boy revealed his true power, Sasuke was able to resist a little longer, awakening his true Uchiha heritage, the Sharingan. Unfortunately, his superior vision only allowed him to dodge the projectiles by a hair, leaving him shattered by the nearby shots. Gradually dying. Nothing he tried could make a difference, and when Sakura broke away from protecting Tazuna to try to help, the fake hunter simply grabbed his crib and threw it in the air. He's seriously doing more harm than good. Inevitably, his opponent had noticed a direct hit on Sasuke's pressure points, paralyzing most of his body, though still leaving him conscious. Zabuza gloated as he confronted Kakashi, daring the other man to expose himself to try to help Heir Uchiha. Hehe. Even if by some miracle you defeat me, you still won't have what it takes to kill Aku. Ever since he was a little kid, I've instilled his fighting skills in him. Even in the face of unthinkable adversities, he has always prevailed. He has lost all respect for his own life, and has become a killing machine, a real ninja. His skills surpass even mine. And he carries within him a formidable legacy of a limit of inherited lineage. Thus, I have forged and carry with me a weapon of incomparable quality and skill. Totally different from the garbage leftovers that follow your footsteps. Then, using the brief distraction, while Kakashi processed the, lately useless, details that Zabuza had dropped, Zabuza prepared to activate her powerful water element, hiding in the fog before Kakashi. He had the opportunity to activate his Sharingan. A shuriken flew out of nowhere and hit Aku on the mask, distracting him, while Naruto loudly charged, Uzumaki Naruto. At your service. Here I am, to save the day. You know how the story goes. Things look bleak until the hero arrives, and then pow. Goodbye, bad guys. Without further delay, he jumped right between the gaps of the mirrors to join Sasuke in the death trap. Sasuke, I'm here to rescue you. The reactions to Naruto's rash and reckless performance, and his subsequent distraction with a shouting match with Sasuke, were revealing. Sakura and Sasuke just yelled at Naruto for still being an idiot, as was his usual response. Kakashi was a little less biased against Naruto. But he was also seeing too much of the attention-seeking village joker at the moment for anyone's good. Infuriating little guy, what we needed was an ambush. Instead, he practically paints himself a target and then jumps straight into the firing line. Now she's just another person I have to save. Except that the moment I try to make a move, Zabuza will simply counter it and I will be wasting my mindless chakra, if not my life. For Zabuza and Aku, everything was completely confused. On the one hand, the guy had set a shining example of ninja tactical deception, and had demonstrated mastery of some high-level jutsus. Now they were just seeing an idiot. Was it all a performance to catch the unprepared? Did he have some kind of brain ailment? Or his need for attention and his naivety regarding ninja life were really that extreme? Everyone was so focused on this that Kakashi, Zabuza, and Aku almost missed kunai's rain and letter bombs that appeared out of nowhere. Land of Waves, the house of Tazuna. Tsunami could barely recognize her son. Her baby, her most precious person, was arming herself to form an army of people who would march against Gato and his bullies. Pride and fear swelled in his chest as he went to follow him, while secretly praying that attack-san already had low control whatever was happening on the bridge. Land of Waves. The bridge. Kakashi cursed rudely as he backed up and threw the earth element, Earth Dome, to lift a part of the bridge to protect himself. Sakura and Tazuna from the sudden hell of explosions. Zabuza used water element, water prison, to surround themselves in a ball of super dense water to protect themselves. While Aku and his own opponents were safely inside the ice element, crystal ice mirrors. The composure of the former mist girls faltered as they all turned to see who was responsible for the new attack. Just a few seconds away, they were heading towards the bridge. 8 masked men and women with the symbol of the village hidden in the bloody fog on their foreheads. Ambu hunters of the mist, this time real. The fact that the mist ninjas acted as a team only underscored the threat they posed, as most Ambu hunters acted alone. That meant that these men and women had been brought together in advance for a specific task and were experts in collaborating together. As the 8 hunters approached, Zabuza quickly activated his enhanced version of water release, hiding in the mist, and with an iron will suppressed his urge to curse loudly, so as not to reveal how worried he really was. Cat must have been paying attention when I mentioned attack, and he realized that he could not only keep a part of my reward, but with him as well. But why did they throw themselves like that instead of waiting until we were more injured? Unless, of course, they want attack and the Uchiha brat Sharingan. They would kill all those people at home for having a lineage, but to refuse a Sharingan and a child who can create more is too tempting. What hypocrites! They must have worried Aku and I thought I would kill them first. Besides, capturing attack of all the living people to torture him and get information out of him would be a great help on its own. They will also want me alive, to learn. No, I'll die first. Kakashi and Zabuza immediately separated and quietly agreed to a temporary ceasefire while dealing with this one mutual threat. However, the enemy of my enemy was still his enemy. However, Aku had no such reservations. He was happy to see an opportunity to spare the life of the young Jonin in front of him. He quickly turned to Naruto. Our dispute seems to be over. We should be allies. If Kakashi had had enough concentration to listen to this offer, he would have shouted a resounding no, to which it would sound like a trap to him. However, Naruto, much more inexperienced, took the opportunity to accept. Maybe everyone could figure this out while he came out looking totally awesome. There you have it, let's get these rude idiots. With Zabuza, knowing that he had to get away a bit from attack, Zabuza quickly jumped to get under the bridge, with 3 of the hunters following him, acting on his memory and trusting him. The fog he had created, Zabuza dodged and made his way between the support pillars, even though they were completely hidden. As expected, one of the traps that the Iaku had set exploded, as one of the 2 hasty pursuers hooked a cable. Unfortunately, they used the substitution technique to survive. They may have even seen us preparing them, so they weren't so surprised. It doesn't matter, that momentary respite is all I need to give everything. It's about time they sent real teams to get me, actually, given all the solo acts I've killed. Heck, we even got Aku's mask from the 3rd attempt. While running to gain more distance, Zabuza moved his mouth to grab a military ration pill hidden under the bandages of his face, but refrained from eating it for a few seconds. He quickly cut his thumb with his sword and rose through the hand signals to summon the allies of the 7 ninja swordsmen of the mist, infesting the waters with sharks as he swallowed. No doubt they have some plan to deal with them, but they should have underestimated how much my chakra has grown since I defected, and how many I can summon now. In addition, with this pill, I have already replenished my chakra. So now the fun begins. The hunters did not disappoint the demon's wrath and charged forward to fight their enemy. With Kakashi, Sakura, and Tazuna, with Zabuza, and therefore the center of the artificial fog, moving away. Kakashi was actually benefiting from the margins of that concealment. The remaining fog around him was light enough that his Sharingan could see his 3 opponents, while they were still suffering from vision problems. Unfortunately, it was also becoming quite clear that it was possible that Kakashi had gotten into trouble this time. He hadn't considered any scenario involving third-party intervention in the conflict, and now Team 7 was outnumbered. And he was the only one who had any chance of getting them out of this alive. They have the advantage, as I still have to keep Sakura and Tazuna safe. I can't turn my back on them, and, judging by those explosions underneath, Zabuza has set booby traps, which I also didn't take into account, which Ambu hunters probably know about. So I have to keep this fight confined here and too close to my students. Nothing but rookie mistakes. Mercilessly, he turned away from such thoughts, to coolly focus on what he needed to do to save everyone in his care. A quick glance with his Sharingan revealed that none of his opponents were clones, which was a relief. Kakashi created a shadow clone and sent it to take out Sakura and Tazuna, while he charged head-on against his enemies, with the kunai in hand. His intention wasn't to kill them, yet just to keep them off balance with quick back and forth attacks between the 3 of them, distracting them and keeping them busy, while the clone grabbed Sakura and Tazuna and carried them to safety. Of all, they were the links. Weaker. However, when he faced the hunters, it became clear that it would be more difficult than expected. They had good reflexes, and predictably, they had been taught to fight someone using silent assassination, meaning they could still anticipate to some extent where he was going to attack, even in that one. This artificial fog. Fortunately, even 3-on-1, his Sharingan ensured he could still land some punches, though nothing deep. To hell with this, one of them yelled at his teammate. "Ale. Do it." With his senses tingling, Kakashi struggled to anticipate what was coming, when suddenly he heard heavy objects being thrown in all directions and was hit by the explosion of a mass. Kakashi's clone tried to retreat silently, but he hadn't managed to get his charges far enough, and the concussion instantly dissipated him. Neither Sakura nor Tazuna were prepared, and they flew out further from the bridge, away from the shore, and from where Aku and Naruto were. And they became unconscious. With Aku and Naruto, the last 2 hunters targeted Aku and Naruto, and split up to attack them separately. The largest of them was at the front, with a large 2-handed blade with which he brutally attacked Aku. To their surprise, Aku rose to the challenge and charged to face them with a senbon in each hand. Aku's specialty was stealth, assassination, and medium and long-range combat. However, he was a prodigious student who wished to have the best weapon. A man who was an expert in all distances and was a recognized master in hand-to-hand combat. Of course, Aku could fight up close and dirty. Also, if these 2 specifically targeted him as part of a pre-planned murder, that means they expected him to try to distance himself from them. That they had some strategy for just that. Therefore, Aku would deny them pleasure. Not to mention that in the time it took Aku to get to a safe distance, Naruto would already be shattered. Despite this surprise, the leading Ambu hunter went on the offensive, throwing blow after blow with his oversized sword, relying on the strength of his arms and his sword to cut through any opposition. As if Zabuza-sama would accept such a weak tool, Aku thought coldly. My training has not only been to make me stronger, but also to provide you with a training partner to encourage your own development. As a student of a master swordsman in a country that idealized them, Aku had long ago learned to fight swords and other long-bladed weapons. With the grace of a dancer, he dodged and dodged every attack. When he saw an opportunity, he would hit the flat part of the blade with his left hand to deflect it and then stab with the other. With his knowledge of the human body, a single stab could kill or incapacitate as needed. A perfect fusion of his fighting style and a more merciful personality. However, his enemy was an Ambu for a reason, and he twisted so that while the senbon was thrust into his dominant hand, it did not reach the dominant muscles and arteries, and he clung to his sword. Upon recovering, he lowered his huge blade to split Aku's skull, only to growl in further disbelief. When Aku blocked the heavy weapon with only a slender arm and a single senbon. It seems that they are still focused on Zabuza-sama, and they can't find out what they need about me. It's good to know that the plan is still working well. Her slender figure concealed the power to crush a man's bones with just the clenching of his hands. And those senbon were actually icicles reinforced and hardened by his chakra. This was child's play. The only flaw of this fighting style was that he had to use only one senbon to be able to block, unlike the usual four that he could hold to throw. With his fingers out of focus, he had a new senbon on his right hand, but the Ambu quickly recovered and changed to a style he favored. The rapid cuts, his sword was a constantly moving ray of light in the thinning fog. In turn, Aku was as firm and immobile as a glacier, holding his ground while dodging or parrying every blow that came at him with minimal effort, while counterattacking with quick stabs. That prevented the mist ninja from. Gori will bring its volume too close. At first glance, it seemed that Aku was stuck defensively, except that this was nothing compared to training against Zabuza-sama himself. Senbon after senbon began to drill the Sambu, and although none was significant so far, the cost began to increase. Aku redirected another attack with his left senbon and tried to stab one of the man's arms with his right, but realized too late that it was a feint, as his opponent had more experience than expected. In a lightning-fast turn, the man lunged forward again with chakra sprouting from his feet to hit Aku with his shoulder, while the teenager was still repositioning himself. The cuts the man received in turn were minimal, as the senbon failed to cut deep enough at that angle, and the greatsword crashed brutally into the right shoulder of its target. The feeling of victory was short-lived, as the mist girl realized that his sword had only partially cut Aku, as if he was much more solid than expected. The real Aku, who had never been on the bridge since the beginning, activated the hidden explosive tag that his ice clone was wearing. Oj, despite his fantastic reflexes and warning, when he jumped back, swordsman Ambu still suffered severe cuts when the explosion threw icy shrapnel at him. Meanwhile, the eighth and final hunter had stayed behind, measuring the Aku clone's abilities, as Naruto hadn't made any moves yet. Naruto had hesitated at first, noticing how the impact of the previous explosions had knocked the already disoriented Sasuke unconscious, leaving him curled up and looking like a pincushion. Unfortunately, after seeing how cool that masked Zabuza kid was, the idiot created some shadow clones and joined the fight against the last Ambu. How else could he prove that he is a future Hokage? Even if I can't beat him, I can keep him busy enough for Kakashi-sensei to arrive. Just like when I freed him from Zabuza, the cold and hard bridge hit Naruto's back when reality taught him otherwise. His vision was blurry as his head was buzzing, and he couldn't see with his right eye. As he struggled to get up, his right arm was on fire and felt wet in several places. I had never seen it coming when he was brutally knocked down. With an effort, he concentrated on what was in front of him to see the clouds that dissipated when their clones killed them. Suddenly, in front of him was the masked boy of Zabuza, fighting the second hunter attacking him, before jumping back to join the downed Naruto. I had saved his life. Aku, the real one, was strangely agitated as he reassessed the situation. Naruto's unpredictability and unexpected techniques had given him an advantage when he first clashed with Zabuza-sama. However, he evidently hadn't realized that it had only lasted that long because Aku's master had been playing with the Leaf Jin. When they first met, the enemy Jonin had shattered the clone army effortlessly, and the only reason Sukunai had injured Naruto was because he had had to dodge Aku's senbon at the last moment. And now the swordsman was getting closer. "Naruto, take your friends and Tazuna and get out of here." The man who had defeated Naruto took the initiative and extended his arms forward with his long and wide sleeves. In a puff of smoke, he had a scroll in his left hand that unfolded itself. With another movement and a burst of smoke, in his right hand was a roll of wire that fit into the knob holes of a pair of crib and long. Despite himself, Naruto's only thought before the scroll movement, Ambu, was, "Great." Then their enemy swung the rope, sending all the knives flying at once to overwhelm them, while the Sambu cleaver attacked their flank. Aku, with his own unfocused arms, threw more than a dozen senbon to knock down the kunai and then turned and ducked to kick Naruto aside, getting them both out of the way of the sword. Using his own momentum, he kept moving and then stabbed Cleaver, both in the anterior tibial artery, aiming just to cause extensive blood loss and knock out the man's left leg. The rest of the kunai flew and did not go defensively around him. Pushing back with his free hand, Aku jumped back, while standing between Naruto and his enemies. More needles in bond appeared between her fingers, pulled from subtle holes in the clothes. Cleaver, Ambu could only curse, tearing off part of her sleeve to act as an emergency compress against bleeding. Meanwhile, Scroll Angulo kept watch, less out of loyalty to a teammate than to recognize that the more he helps, the better. With another crib strip and already extracted from his unsealed scroll, a temporary standstill, Naruto was amazed. That was the second time his mysterious enemy turned ally saved him, and he seemed to do it with such pure genius that he seemed even better than Kakashi. As it was, he could only keep watching these rapidly happening events, unable to even consider giving up the battle, wanting to stay to see more of this child. Super elite ninja, and then he remembered the promise he had made, how he had stuck his own kunai in his hand, swearing that he would never run again, that he would never set out on his path again. How he had kept that promise even in front of someone like Zabuza? How could he live with himself if he ran away now? With the adrenaline easing his pains and trying to get rid of the blood running down his eye, Naruto walked over and stood next to his new friend. "Seriously, I couldn't wait to tell this to Iruka-sensei or Aku when they meet again. I told you to get out of here." He snapped the masked figure that was actually Aku. The only reason he hadn't attacked yet, while one of the hunters was vulnerable, was because he was trying to buy time, so his friend could escape to a safe place, as the Blood Mist ninjas well knew. "I'm not running away," Naruto snarled. "I swore I would protect that old man and build this bridge, and I'm not going to go back on my word. Also, and with his Naruto made 10 new clones, if they kill you, I doubt we can get far enough away." "You're right, you know," he said. Scroll, Ambu. "There are no witnesses. Nothing personal." With Zabuza behind his turban, the demon of the bloody mists smiled with the satisfaction of a predator. The hunters had come with a plan to take down the sharks' depth charges. Fools. As one hunter threw the depth charges into the air, another of them kept sending out a wide gust of wind jutsu, dissipating swaths of fog with each explosion. Unfortunately for them, it was clear that these guys hadn't really practiced as a team. The wind jutsu was a smart idea to eliminate Zabuza's terrain advantage, especially since he was an amazing teacher. Comparable in this environment. However, if the burst was too big, it would disrupt the depth charges that were necessary to handle the shark's summons. A team that had practiced this correctly could struggle with the right balance, but these fools were too busy trying to coordinate each other when they were supposed to be fighting. They probably just put them together in the hope that it would make enough of a difference. Typical of the idiots at home, not to mention it was insulting, given how much I've been underestimated. At that moment, he was stalking quickly through the thick fog, dodging their attempts to find him. While he was the master of silent murder, these guys weren't orgazons either. which meant I'd have to break a sweat to beat them. Perceiving a faint hissing in the air, he realized that one of the boats still in the air was nearby. With a quick leap, he placed himself next to them and threw the container full of letter bombs at their pursuers. Boom, wow, what? Ah, well, it looks like I burned them a little. After assessing the location of his enemies, he decided to sacrifice some of his shuriken by unleashing an andanal. After all, even half a second deflecting his projectiles could cost an enemy his life, and any wounds would only accumulate. Who knows? Maybe they'll even cut off his eye or his jugular. Sounds like they've been diverted. Wait, where's the third one of them? Instinct made Zabuza turn around at the last moment, lifting his sword from the executioner, with the flat part facing the attack from behind, deflecting the oncoming Kune. Bombs with letters attached, he growled to himself, jumping back and hoping his sword would absorb the worst of the incoming explosion. I can always fix it later with the iron from his blood. With Kakashi by the sound of those explosions, Zabuza is keeping busy, Kakashi thought as he killed his first hunter. The idiot had tried to attack the copier ninja head-on, after one of his teammates had partially diluted the fog with a wind jutsu. Even worse, asshole. Anbu had done this while making hand signals right in front of Kakashi. There was a reason why Kakashi was praised for his special eye, distinguishing him from the Uchiha clan even shortly after Obito's death. And that was that, while it was true that the rest of the Uchiha also had Sharingan, and ones that they were totally compatible with their bodies, but Kakashi could use his better. During the Third Great War, ninja had caused such havoc that the Uchiha had never retaliated or protested against a stranger using an ability that had always been theirs. Kakashi was too valuable. The Sharingan allowed the user to perfectly copy and memorize the physical movements of his opponent, and thus learn the enemy's hand signals, and even get information about the inner workings of some jutsu. But learning a new ninjutsu involved much more than simply knowing the proper hand signals and what element of jutsu was required. Learning to successfully imitate and actually execute the technique afterwards required, even for the Uchiha, a lot of work. Or to be a genius, and Kakashi was one of the latter. In addition, knowing hundreds of techniques was of little use if you were not sure which one was the best for the particular situation you were in. It was too complex for them, particularly in the heat of battle, leading most ninjas to prefer mastery over a more humble variety of jutsu. However, even before being promoted to Jonin, Kakashi had not only already learned and created many more techniques than many Jonin 3 times his age, and used them all flawlessly except his signature technique at the beginning, but he had also carefully memorized every bit of information he could about the enemy ninjas. The Blade Intelligence Networks had compiled profiles of each of the most powerful ninjas from the rival villages, listing their preferred tactics and the specific elemental jutsu they were capable of, their experience, past, their mission preferences, even their personal lives. And Kakashi had memorized each and every one of his vital statistics. For each of these hundreds of individuals, he had created theoretical stratagems to neutralize each and every one of their abilities, so that he could kill them, as well as an accurate view of how others were struggling. In short, no matter how strong these Anbu hunters were, Kakashi had already developed numerous plans to defeat them years ago, having already set aside dozens of jutsu that had the highest probability of success. And yes, the white hair threat could effortlessly sort out each and every method on the fly without any difficulty. It was Captain Jonin Kakashi Sharingan I attack. Seeing the world in slow motion, thanks to the gift of Obito, he recognized the approaching technique as a water release technique, and one that was more accurate when fired from the mouth instead of using pre-existing sources. Kakashi instantly prepared a counterattack, ducked under the resulting torrent of water, flew through his own hand seals, and used lightning element, inspiration wave. The flash of electricity went through the water and chilled the woman from the inside out. If she's not dead, she'll probably stay still until this is over. Aware that his previous failed attempt with his clone had halved his chakra, he approached the remaining 2, with a kunai in each hand, and his blood-red eye burning. With Zabuza, it has to be a sensor. It's the only way someone could have found me so quickly. Zabuza cursed, realizing that her enemies weren't the only ones guilty of underestimating their prey. He had been lucky, but when he hit his left foot, he had still suffered some burns. Sure enough, another barrage of kunai came from that same Anbu, forcing Zabuza to change his position. Hearing triumphant shouts, he knew that the other two hunters were advancing. Although in his case, he could not only hear them, but also smell their singed uniforms. Advancing carelessly, confident that sensor, both of them had noticed a decisive blow to the traitor. The advancing mist ninja were startled to hear their comrade scream, weren't they? "Stop it, you idiots!" Before they could register this, they heard the sound of something breaking through the water around them, and before they could scream, they were being dragged down. Suffocated by the water, they were only able to shake themselves, while the surviving sharks brutally tore them apart. "Is he okay?" "That's much better." Zabuza's voice drifted through the fog with a sadistic glee. "Actually, they deserve to forget about it." "And what about you?" "With Aku and Naruto, these guys are pretty good, though not good enough," Aku mused. "Their problem is that they are individually overspecialized and became greedy. If the two full squads had waited, then they could support each other enough to overwhelm even Zabuza-sama. Instead, they got ahead of the attempt to also get the Sharingan and split, ruining their main advantage. They were probably watching my clone fight Lucia, and they assumed it was real and thought I was weak enough that they could easily kill Naruto and me. Then join the others to fight attack, and finally attacking Zabuza-sama. Arrogance. They know nothing of my true power, and now they dare not retreat and turn their backs on me. I will protect Zabuza-sam and her dream, no matter the cost." All this passed through his mind in a split second, his face as impassive as the mask he had on it. The man with the sealing scrolls was definitely the more dangerous of the two, especially after the man with the sword had his mobility paralyzed. Naruto was now keeping the latter busy with an apparent barrage, seemingly endless, of shadow clones. Now that Cleaver, Ambu, was injured enough, the Blade Jnin was able to serve as a satisfying distraction. Meanwhile, Aku faced his own opponent, who was opening and throwing a seemingly endless amount of weapons. Unfortunately, Aku was running out of needles and bomb to attack and/or intercept, which forced him to use Ice Element, crafting fancy tools to create more. Inspired by that observation, Aku quickly shouted the orders, "Naruto clones. Don't use your fists, just drop your weapons." After all, each of them should be an exact copy of the original set. Obediently, the Orange Horde threw all their kunai and shuriken without restrictions to overwhelm their enemy. Why didn't I think of that earlier? No, why didn't he think of that? It's an obvious move with the clones, but Naruto never did it. Are you so inexperienced with your own technique? I just assumed he would and I didn't tell him. Noticing that his comrade could not use a proper substitution with such a foot injury, Scroll, Ambu jumped to the front and opened a large metal shield to block the bombing. "I got you," Aku thought calmly, activating Ice Element, Crystal Ice Mirrors, now that the two of them were so close. Now, even if Scroll, Ambu escaped, he should be so distracted by the technique that Aku could easily dispatch Cleaver, Ambu, without leaving Naruto vulnerable while he was distracted. A gust of water knocked him out of his triumphant thoughts, as the darkened sword wielder burst out and unleashed a massive water bullet technique, water release against Naruto, only for Aku to jump in the way. Stunned, he found himself on the ground and barely moved away from the kunai that attacked him. But he could not stop the gasp of pain that escaped from his throat when they still found meat. Aside, Naruto could only stare in horror at what had happened to his new teammate, unable to concentrate on the hunters, who were lining up more kunai to finish them both off. His mask. It's Aku. What is he doing? He's been trying to help me all this time. Let's get this over with, Cleaver growled, Ambu. Then we can grab the Uchiha child, while the others finish with the rest. And that was the straw that broke the camel's back. Although he was still confused about Aku, Naruto had considered him a friend since they met in the forest many days ago. And now, Aku had literally jumped in front of Naruto to save him, as Iruka had done against Mizuki, as if he was a true friend, more friend than Sasuke ever acted. Even though Naruto knew that they were so similar in their dark loneliness. However, with those last words threatening, and Aku struggling to get up while spitting blood, Naruto finally got an idea of what a ninja's life was like. It was a dark and violent world, full of pain and loss, where children were killed because it was convenient. And people showed no mercy to the cherished people of Naruto, and that was unacceptable. If this is what a ninja's life was like, then Naruto promised that he would change it. In reality, it was a childish dream, an unrealistic promise to try to change the world. But sometimes, big changes have to start with something small. And sometimes these idealists really have the power to change the world, especially if they are motivated. Especially if they see their loved ones about to be eviscerated. For the first time in his life, Naruto allowed himself to completely vent, to release the anger that he had never dared to show the world since he was very young. Lest everyone really rejected him, for the first time in his life, he was able to vent all the fury he was capable of feeling, without fear of consequences, and revel in it. Because those masked monsters were enemy ninjas threatening the mission. They were the bad guys. They were evil and had to die. It was that simple. And with that euphoria, power came. The world seemed to move slowly under an orange haze. He felt light as a feather and brimming with energy that just wanted to get out. Now he felt strong enough to tear solid steel. What came out of his mouth was between a roar and a scream, as years of pent-up emotions finally took voice. Aku and Naruto's prey could only stare in disbelief as someone they had dismissed as a threat developed fangs and claws, and was surrounded by a swirl of orange chakra that took the shape of the head of a snarling beast on little Jin's head. Aku's brain was struggling to keep up. His training couldn't help him deal with this shock. Impossible. Your chakra is manifesting physically. And it's a terrible chakra. A closer examination of Naruto's body only increased his confusion. His arm and his forehead, the wounds are healing on their own. What the hell is he? And in response, he heard a voice emitting a strangled whisper, Hinchiriki, that form he is taking. Let's see, Ambu. It's the Nine Tails. Faced with this new threat, Aku could only gawk at the two motionless Vladimist ninjas clutching their kunai, before turning to look at Naruto, who was now facing them all, with red eyes and narrowed pupils. Zabuza, and the surviving child of the bloody mist trembled with fear, trying to understand what this new development was. Horror and despair gave Kakashi new strength. I have to end this now. I have to know what's going on with Naruto's seal, or this whole island will be destroyed. Unbeknownst to these warriors, the respective armies of Gato and Inari continued to advance. Their inexperienced senses left them blind to the bloodbath they were approaching. With Zabuza, I have to change tactics, Zabuza thought as she continued playing cat and mouse with Sensor, Ambu. Keeping my fog on means that he will limit himself to throwing toys at me, because just because I feel doesn't mean that I can guarantee a good enough shot without his sight. Prolonging the fight is also draining my chakra. He can avoid my sharks, and he avoids me every time I try to get close enough to cut him off. Wait, the sounds are changing. Quickly severing his chakra, the fog dissipated enough for Zabuza to see that his enemy was creating water clones to fight him. Oh, so he thinks he's so smart. She's adorable actually. I trust the sound, so it's making more noise, all identical, to confuse me. But this is nothing he hasn't handled before, but his damn sensory skills complicate things. Hey, it's not a big deal, although I have to hurry up and find Aku. And then we can figure out what this new, disgusting chakra is. I'm not even a sensor and I can feel it. Zabuza made similar gestures with his hands and created an equal amount of clones and charged forward with them, while roaring at his shark invocation to follow suit. His summoning time was about to expire, another reason why it was necessary to finish this quickly. But the blood mist demon was counting on them to last long enough to turn the tide in his favor. If the Ambu hunter was surprised by the sudden frenzied charge, he gave no sign of it and sent his clones to attack the original Zabuza. His own plan was simple. Unlike the traitor, he could easily tell the difference between the original and the clones, as they had smaller chakra reserves. Hidden among his own clones, the masked man would introduce more letter bombs into the fray and retire. Zabuza was not an idiot. Attracting those enemy clones, he simply replaced one of his own clones and was now flanking the sensor. Original Ambu, which was visibly lagging behind. Water release, water shark bullet. Before his jutsu, the water solidified to form a shark, which lunged at its target, while Zabuza's clones launched shuriken as a distraction. Like a fish in a barrel, Zabuza smiled. His opponents were willing to weaken him with counterattacks to his signature fighting style, while overlooking that he could also fight head-on with ease. The hunter switched places with one of his clones who had moved far enough away and dodged the water jutsu, but it was immediately pressed as Zabuza charged forward to cut off half of his remaining clones with a single blow of his huge sword. Zabuza's water clones took the initiative and attacked their remaining enemies to prevent further substitutions, even when the sharks attacked from below. Realizing how much he had underestimated his enemy, Censor, Ambu played his last card and unfolded a scroll to deploy his own supply of depth charges. He activated them all and waited a few seconds for the fuse to run out more. He threw most of them in the air and then charged at the original with the last one he had in his hand. Seeing the threat and the smoking fuse of the explosive, Zabuza simply smiled and cut the chakra from his feet. He dived underwater and grabbed onto a nearby shark that dived. He knew that underwater he could dodge his enemy even if he pursued him. And with the falling explosives, the fool had simply turned the surface into a trap. Coming to the same conclusion, the increasingly desperate hunter abandoned his kamikaze attack, dropped his depth charge, and tried to run. He almost made it, but the explosion of the last of the falling explosives shook him. Slowly, like the demon he was, Zabuza emerged from the waves, emitting all his murderous intent. So, this is what the fourth Mizukage claims is a stronger breed of girl, he growled at Deadman Steel. They outplayed you from the beginning, and should have never sent you against me. With a single flash of the body flashing technique, he decapitated the hunter with poop. Kakashi, water release, technique of hiding in the fog, Kakashi shouted, surprising his targets by using his village's signature technique to replace this fog that Zabuza was no longer emitting. I was saving these to fight Zabuza, and I would like to mark them first, but Naruto is the priority at the moment. I have to get this over with quickly. Knowing that his enemies were also changing positions, Kakashi approached the hunter girl he had electrocuted earlier. Mercilessly, he slit her throat to make sure she was dead and pulled a scroll out of her bulletproof vest with his other hand. Rubbing a little firm, the blood gushing over the scroll, Kakashi quickly performed more hand seals and threw the scroll against the bridge. Summoning, Earth Element, Tracker Fang Technique. Screams tore the air and Kakashi dispelled the fog, revealing each of the two hunters with dogs, and mobilizing them with fangs buried in their limbs. Without missing a beat, Kakashi grabbed 4 of the remaining kunai and threw them at his motionless targets, piercing their throats. A quick sniff from the dogs confirmed that the missed Ambu were dead and that there was no one else hiding nearby. Satisfied, Kakashi looked over to where he could feel the corrosive chakra emanating from Naruto. With Naruto and Aku, the lame-footed hunter grabbed his sword and got into position. He knew that he couldn't run and probably wouldn't be able to kill the demon spawn anyway, so he would serve as a distraction. While his companion took his most powerful sealing scroll, he was not disappointed in either respect. With a roar, Naruto charged with a speed that would make a Jonin proud. Crashing directly into Cleaver, Ambu, the man struck with perfect perfection, but still he was torn from his hands, as if he had hit a cliff wall, and the same was knocked over on his back. And then, Naruto sat hanging over the panting man and tore off his arm. The second hunter knew that he was a dead man as he watched the teenager laughing at the howls of his prey, but he swore that he would die as befitted a child from the village hidden in the mists. He grabbed 2 more special scrolls, unfolded them, and activated specific seals, releasing a sealed version of Water Element, hiding in the fog, and jumped into his temporary shelter. While this version of the technique would only last for 55 seconds, it did not require any more chakra, which left the rest of his reserves for his trump card. The sound of more flesh tearing, and a last gasp, told him the fate of his companion. And slowly, very slowly, he heard the sounds of someone approaching him. Strange sounds too, as if they were walking hunched over on their hands and feet. Kakashi could have arrived first, but he made a detour to grab Sakura and Tazuna and pull them off the bridge. If the situation got even worse, the bridge would probably be the first victim, and they would fall and drown. Also, the return of a thick fog from Naruto's location was a clue that Naruto was still knee-deep in a fight. Attacking carelessly was suicidal under normal circumstances, and at this moment, Naruto might even attack him without recognizing him. Therefore, Zabuza arrived at the place before Kepi Ninja, trying to figure out what exactly was happening. Suddenly, an explosion of something was unleashed on him, forcing him to change his balance as the fog rushed towards him. That was it, chakra, an explosion of energy so pure that it was a physical force in itself. With the fog completely dissipated, he took in the view before him. Aku, unmasked and injured. Probably not seriously, as his tool was sturdy and a good doctor in his own right. The boy was lying on the floor, looking as if he had been shaken a little while being pricked with needles. A dead Ambu hunter, missing an arm and most of his throat, upper chest and jaw. A seriously frightened surviving hunter, kneeling next to an open ceiling scroll, holding his hands on the tiger seal. And a Hinchiriki. What? Well, seriously, what's wrong with this guy? What are the chances that this mission will turn out like this? Zabuza paused, raising his sword while frowning as he thought. No, wait, what are the odds really? A Hinchiriki is the ultimate trump card of a hidden village. If they're not keeping him safe at home, why is his training and skills so out of date? The boy has talent, but compared to Yagura or the Hinchiriki of the Hidden Cloud, well, there is no comparison. He took another look at Aku, who strangely didn't seem to be afraid of the blonde. In fact, he seemed more worried about him, to the point that he hadn't noticed Zabuza's arrival. Also, judging by the wounds from this tool, his wounds had come from the Mist Ninja, not the Blade Jin. He carefully moved his heel against the ground to get Aku's attention. Unfortunately, it was not subtle enough, as both children heard it, as the Hinchiriki stopped his round, and advanced on his hands and feet. Reading Zabuza's questioning look, Aku nodded his head to reassure him. Hey kid, Naruto, right? Do you hear me? Zabuza shouted, keeping her hands at her sides. Did you make some kind of deal with Aku? Because, I must say, I'm going to call off the whole trying to kill Tazuna thing. Cat must have betrayed me if these guys showed up. Actually, Zabuza wasn't completely sure about that, but he was too exhausted to risk fighting a Hinchiriki. Especially when the brief glances of the corpses he had seen on the bridge showed that Kakashi was still alive, though absent. In fact, I will even include the cat head as an apology, and thanks for helping my follower. Does that sound good? You attacked all of me. It was the grumpy response, so charged with rage that the boy found it difficult to speak clearly. That's a thing of the past, boy. It's not a pun intended. That's how the ninja world works, except now the situation has changed. No, Naruto snapped, as Zabuza fought the urge to put his sword between the two. It shouldn't be like that. Ninjas should be different. But I don't want to fight. You. First, this man has to die. After that, me. The steel crashed into Naruto's head, while Ambu finally gathered the necessary amount of chakra for the sealing technique. Infinite restrictions. Countless amounts of spiked chains came out of the scroll and crashed into Naruto and everyone else present, entangling and tearing them. The force with which the bonds were expelled caused them to entangle the enemies of the hunter ninja. Naruto struggled to get out, protected by his chakra veil, but unable to move as his own efforts to escape kept squeezing them tighter. Even the bursts of chakra from his body only seemed to make the situation worse. Zabuza roared with rage, both because of his pain and how he had idiotically focused only on the main threat, and like a rookie overlooked the others. Aku raised an ice shield to protect himself, while Sasuke came out unscathed, as the hunter was so surprised by his good luck that he decided it was possible that he could still complete his mission. More and more chains were created, burying the Hinchiriki and traitors. Well, this is unexpected. Trembling with exhaustion, the Ambu hunter turned to see his contact, the cat businessman standing in front of him, with a veritable army of cheap thugs covering the background. Under the bridge, Aku emerged from an ice mirror he had created a minute ago. panting as he struggled to avoid sinking below the surface of the water. Creating a mirror out of his line of sight was exhausting, even with the mass of an ocean literally under his feet. And he had spent even more chakra creating a shield strong enough to protecting him, along with all the other fighting today. A moment later, Zabuza also fell, covered with wounds, and holding his sword in a way that indicated to Aku that the infamous sword had been used to block most of the attack. The man was lucky to have preserved the space to fall across the bridge using an earthen jutsu, sliding through the concrete. Zabuza-sama, we have to go back. What? We have to help Naruto. Zabuza looked Aku in the eyes and cocked his head. You're not asking me as my tool, but as your own person, right? Aku paled at that, but Zabuza just shrugged his shoulders. I can hear Kat's voice up there, so I have to go back anyway. If he's here, he really betrayed us. It seems that your little Hinshiriki is still alive, so there are other advantages. With that, it took off. An enraged attack, Kakashi ran his hand through the chest of the last hunter. And was the first thing Zabuza saw when he reappeared at the top of the bridge. The jutsu was so powerful that Zabuza could see the chakra in the ninja Kopia's hand. Then, Kat, cried Zabuza indifferently. What is all this? Gato shuddered for a moment, and then looked at all the blood of Zabuza and Kakashi, and regained his courage. By mistakenly thinking that it was mainly theirs. Hehe. There's been a slight change of plans, Zabuza. Or your plans, anyway. This was what I had in mind from the very beginning. You're going to die, demon. Here and now, you must have guessed it. I never intended to pay you. The little tyrant opened his mouth to say more, except that the oversized sword cut off his head. Zabuza looked at Kakashi, who was furious, and cocked his head questioningly. My contract against Tazuna is no longer relevant, and your son was struggling to help my apprentice. Therefore, I have no interest in fighting you anymore. Kill this scumbag, and then we'll see what we can do for the blonde boy. The ensuing fight was quick and brutal, with most of the lower-class mercenaries being killed by letter bombs, while the fleeing stragglers were wiped out with kunai and Zabuza's executioner's sword. Frankly, they were not enough to justify more time and effort. Kakashi angrily looked at the pile of chains, knowing that his chakra was severely depleted, especially considering that he had foolishly used a lightning sword in his rage against the Blood Mist ninja. If he could have appeared from behind in that way, a simple kunai would have been enough. Suddenly, another wild roar emanated from him, followed by a muffled nose clash. Kakashi quickly ducked under the bridge, immediately jumped towards the ripple in the water that meant something had fallen, and pulled out an exhausted Naruto. Thank God, the fox's chakra had retired. Looking up, he could see the jagged hole through the bridge, with the tangled ends of broken chains hanging down. And it also kept him safe from those spikes, long enough for it to make its way down and out. To his surprise, when Kakashi returned to the top of the bridge, Zabuza had collapsed. In less than a minute, he had turned pale, sweaty, bloodshot eyes, and looked like he had collapsed to the ground when his trembling limbs gave way. A boy, a girl, dressed in the same outfit as the demon apprentice, although without his mask, he turned to Kakashi with a desperate expression. The chains were poisoned, the boy cried, probably desperately. Do you have anything? After a pause, Kakashi shook his head with genuine regret. Someone with Zabuza's ability deserved better. For any other village, the Anbu hunter would have the antidote in case he or his allies were accidentally poisoned, but not the Bloody Mist. Moreover, as Exambu, they would know exactly what inoculations Zabuza had been given and would prepare accordingly. Besides, being on the run would have deprived him of the last agents to handle the versions newer of the poisons that all the villages were constantly developing. Not that Kakashi was complaining too much, as it looked like there was going to be one less threat. I'm sorry. I have nothing. And it doesn't look like Zabuza will last long enough for me to get something in time. Coughing, Zabuza raised her head. In that case, I guess I'll have to play one of my last cards, attack. If you seal me up, and take me back to the blade to recover, I will give them information. Kakashi sighed with an even greater disappointment. I'm sorry, but I have no chakra left to do. Then he pointed to a hole in the bag of his gun. And my soldier pills got lost because of some explosions. However, he noticed how exhausted and injured the young renegade ninja was, how returning to the bridge must have drained him of his remaining strength, and how relatively well Naruto was doing. I'll go see if any of the other hunters had anything useful. He left, leaving Naruto alone with them, trusting that Naruto would be healthy enough to defend himself if necessary. Zabuza was too weak to do anything, and Aku was too worried. The dying man stared at Naruto and asked, "What about you, kid? You seem strong enough to keep doing it, what?" "I do not know how to seal people, you are an Uzumaki." "Of course you know that by now, Uzumaki." "What do you mean?" Naruto stammered as he dealt with another surprise. On this very emotional day. Gradually, Zabuza's attitude changed from accusatory to incredulous. "Kid, are you honestly telling me that you've never heard of the Uzumaki clan? From Uzusio Gakure. Famous allies of the leaf. Sealed in his blood." Noticing the increasing confusion with each question, Zabuza slowly nodded his head. "All right, kid, a word of advice, start asking more questions. Look beyond what's underneath." Even as he said this, a flash of naked calculation danced so intensely in his eyes that even Naruto could see it. Slowly, Naruto nodded in turn, trying to process what his former enemy was trying to tell him. Tears began to fall from her eyes as the repressed emotions of the day seeped out. Besides, even he could tell that Zabuza was dying, a man he had come to respect, especially because he was valuable to Aku, and apparently he had come to help him against the last hunter, who, even now at the end, seemed to be trying to help Naruto. The truth is that Zabuza felt too insulted by such wasted potential and thought that it would make attack life miserable. More importantly, Naruto seemed to be literally the only living being who genuinely cared about Aku. Except that he would have to teach him in the only terms he thought the latter understood. "But since I'm about to die, there's only one thing left for me, Aku." "Yes, Zabuza-sama," Aku said quietly, struggling against the fatigue and pain of the battle and getting back on the bridge. "I have one last mission for you as my tool." Then the dying Zabuza turned his head towards Naruto. "Boy, I need you to do a man a favor." Kakashi continued to check the corpses, unaware of what was happening with Naruto. "Take care of Aku for me," Zabuza asked bluntly, and before Aku or Naruto could react, he turned to the former. "Follow the child, stay by his side, and be his weapon. And you should know that my greatest pride was being there to take care of you and train you, my tool, my weapon, my son." And then, tired of all the drama he had endured that day, Zabuza lowered his head, closed his eyes, and let the Grim Reaper come for him. Tira de Fugo, Konoha, Tor dello Cage. Later, the third cage stared at the scroll that the summoned dog of Kakashi Pakin had brought him, feeling more than a little surprised, as he tried to decide what to do with the information he had received. The problem of Tazuna falsifying his mission request was easily solved, as Kakashi's assessment of Land of Waves reactions led him to conclude that Earth would prosper and apply for many future missions. In fact, the solidarity shown by the People's Militia that arrived late, led by the grandson of the old man, was taken as proof that the nation was on the way to rebuilding itself stronger than ever. The bridge builder had also agreed, without even needing any encouragement, to state that he had paid in full, in advance, for the proper issue request, so as not to encourage any future customers to do the same. After the events, Kakashi had carefully counseled his students, working to help them deal with the events. Or at least, what he claimed was an appropriate therapy. With that man it might be hard to tell. The attack of the hunters and the massacred corpses that had lain around the bridge had helped the boy to understand the true and harsh world of being a ninja. Even a ninja from Konoha. According to the report, Sakura was apparently shocked, but Kakashi wanted to wait a little longer to see that he also assimilated the message. Sasuke had seen worse when he was a kid, so he wasn't that affected. But Kakashi was worried about how much Lucia's pride had been hurt by the defeat. As for Naruto, although he initially felt vindicated by the death of so many bad guys, the guy was finally defeated. It had taken Kakashi some work to help Naruto, except it was mainly thanks to his new partner. On a related note, Naruto was also surprisingly devastated by Zabuza's death. It was a bit surprising that Zabuza's body had been burned and the ashes buried, instead of being brought in 4 medical experts to examine for some secret of the fog. However, Kakashi had decided to respect Naruto's wishes in this regard so that the boy would not get angry again. It wasn't until later that Kakashi got a chance to sneak a peek at Naruto's seal. Although he was nowhere near the level of his dead sensei, Kakashi still possessed enough skill to know when even a high-level seal was breaking. And fortunately, he had been able to confirm that there were no signs that the seal was getting weaker. However, that didn't explain how something from the fox chakra had escaped. That small detail alone made the Hokage decide to classify the whole mission as something more than top secret. Kakashi would write a fake mission report, and only the Hokage would know all the details. The Team 7 gens couldn't say otherwise, as they had been unconscious or confused, IDS influenced or partially possessed. It was still unclear when the Q had got away a bit. No. The real dilemma lay with the mysterious Aku, who had sworn to be Naruto's servant. Kakashi and his dogs believed he was being honest, which was a strong character reference given the experience they had. However, letting a foreign shinobi spend time with the village Hinchiriki, one who was an extremely emotionally vulnerable teenager, Irizen Sarutobi, as supreme military dictator by appointment of the daimyo, had the authority to admit this, but he should do it. Then a thought struck him like lightning. Kakashi's report also says that he knows about the Kubi and that he doesn't care. This is a guy who accepts Naruto as he is. Someone who will be there for him. The Hokage remembered with bitterness the oath he had made to Naruto on the day of his birth, except that nothing he did seemed to work. The cesspool of discord that had emerged was staggering, and Naruto's fate had become the focus of much underground politics over the years. The professor was the ruler of the village hidden among the leaves, but Naruto, unknowingly, was the center of a silent war that had plagued the village for years, as too many people resisted his orders. The third Kage still vividly remembered that terrible day, as he quickly crossed the collapsing barrier as Kushina passed by. Lying on the ground next to his wife, with most of his organs ripped out by the fox's fang, and his soul about to be consumed by the god of death, Minato had still coughed through his blood for the Irizen to promise that his son would be treated as a hero and would not be seen as the monster's prison, nor blamed for his crimes. Maybe he's ready to know the whole truth. Naruto almost died on a rank mission at the age of 12. He fought one of the 7 swordsmen and 8 hunters of the Bloody Mist, all of them famous for their bloodlust, without ever knowing the whole truth. Who is he? Who were his parents? That's all. He deserves to know. Aku may be too dangerous to have around, but I'll see how Naruto has developed, and then I'll make a decision on whether or not he's ready for the full truth of his heritage. Land of Waves. The bridge is almost finished. Aku knew that he only had a minute at most away from Kakashi's watchful eye, so he quickly passed under the bridge and focused his gaze on the other side of the distant mainland coast, on a distinctive outcrop of rocks visible even from the country of the waves, forming a mirror next to him, and at the designated meeting place, Aku quickly traveled through his mirrors to appear on the other side of the ocean and addressed the ninja kneeling in front of him. Zabuza Momoki-sama has died. His blunt words caused a stir among the followers of his former teacher. But he gave me a final order on his death. He has assigned me to a young man from Konoha with great potential. If the boy is willing, he will be a great help to us. Enough to be decisive in our war. Anyway, now I have sworn to be at your service. The representatives of the former members of Zabuza's small revolutionary army stared at Aku in disbelief. However, they knew that any protest would have repercussions, as they had no illusions about their position in the pecking order. Compared to Aku, a wrong word about his new decision or his new master would be painful. Finally, one asked, "What if he's not willing to help us overthrow the 4th Mizukage? We've already gathered enough supplies and equipment to last you a while. Go to Base 3 and wait for me there for 6 months. Train hard. I'll send you more information then. If you have not heard from me, I ask you to try to join Might Muri's rebel group as he is most likely dead. With that said, the ice user re-entered his mirror and disappeared through it. My apologies, Zabuza-sama, but I will keep working to achieve your ambition. Helping Naruto-sama will be my priority, except that I will use my time in on the blade to see if I can help our homeland. I know you thought that I only helped you fight Mizukage for your own ambitions, but in truth, it was not in small measure my goal to put an end to the purges and prevent more children from having to kill their own families in self-defense. Kisses or makeup, Zabuza Momoki-sama has died, Aku announced. And his blunt words caused a stir among the followers of his former teacher. But he gave me a final order on his death. He has assigned me to a young man from Konoha with great potential. If the boy is willing, he will be a great help to us. Others. Anyway, now I have sworn to be at your service. The representatives of the former members of Zabuza's small revolutionary army stared at Aku in disbelief. However, they knew that any protest would have repercussions, as they had no illusions about their position in the pecking order in combat. Comparison with Aku. That had been instilled in them from the very beginning. Flashback scene. Not wanting to bother with the initial training of these new recruits, Zabuza stepped aside, enjoying her morning routine. As she diligently fixed her sword, running the fish carcasses against her too. Then the leaf. I could absorb his blood. Aku was addressing the men and women kneeling on the deck of the ship in front of him, his face serene but serious. All right, worms, listen up. Aku is about to teach you the pecking order, you the earth, the worms inside the earth, Aku's stool, Zabuza, and Aku. Any questions? A nameless ninja raised his hand. Yeah, me. The next thing the man knew, he was thrown from the moving boat to land in the water. Trembling with fear, the remaining recruits watched as Aku returned the call to the unfortunate man, enjoys the swim back to the ship. And suddenly flashed a disgusting smile. Bitch. In the blink of an eye he was back to his serious expression. Any other questions? He received silence as a response, and showed that same deranged smile again. Fine. Then we can start. End of the flashback. Yes, the assembled rebels had no desire to challenge the pecking order.